Saturn moving into Capricorn beginning December 2017 and continuing through 2020 marks a new chapter in our political, professional, and financial lives. We've been hearing for some time about the end of work due to AI, mechanization, sending jobs overseas. At some point, we will be looking at a world where manual labor and routine work will no longer exist. First off, that's a good thing. Most jobs are soul-deadening and oftentimes barely support the most basic lifestyle. Likewise, equating work with money is part of a transactional, slave-based mentality. Along with Pluto and Capricorn, which is the deconstruction of the patriarchy and the corporate model, Saturn and Capricorn will be the end of work as we know it. The short-term concern is how the globalists and wealthy will deal with this dead end, supply-side economics, where people no longer have the money to spend on unnecessary products and services. There will be other astrology in play as well. Uranus and Taurus beginning next year will challenge the currency system and values in general and may bring them into greater balance. Fake money, money earned passively or through exploitation, may begin to lose its edge. Money earned honestly and through equivalent exchange of goods and services will become the new normal. But first, the corporatocracy and plutocracy must die. While Trump was congratulating himself on the passage of the tax bill, Paul Ryan stood behind him as the Grinch who stole Christmas from the poor and future generations. To Trump's point, this is the biggest tax cut in U.S. history, but rather than a celebration, it constitutes the most egregious piece of legislation in 30 years, a Saturn cycle. And no matter what propaganda will be spread, this act is the final nail in the coffin of the GOP party. The cynical tax reform bill, rather than spur economic growth, will more likely cause an even larger bubble followed by a massive stock market crash and depression. Lawmakers haven't learned from the past or don't care. They will be repeating 1929. Saturn was in Capricorn as well. Why 1929 and this upcoming crash will be more intense is because Saturn is being accompanied by heavy outer planets. In the late 2030s, Uranus was present in Aries, while this time around, Pluto will be grinding down the corporatocracy plotline to the bone. Saturn in Capricorn also brings up the abuses of the father or the authoritarian. For those who have voted or asked for a strongman, they will now see how this will backfire on them. If we project authority outside ourselves and blame the government, the deep state, the liberals, and yes, even the conservatives for our problems, without taking ownership of what we can and cannot change, we unconsciously ask to be victimized. In these instances, we are reacting like damaged or abused children, which many of us in fact are, by our current societal model. Bullies abound in the world, starting in our families. This creates a pattern of dealing with authority in dysfunctional ways in relationships, business, and the government. Those individuals with crazy authority figures growing up and who have not done the work are the ones most likely to have voted for Trump and Brexit, etc., and are operating out of unresolved trauma. Saturn in Capricorn will be a boon for those who are adults, who take responsibility for their lives and are advancing their legacy, i.e. right livelihood, with integrity. Those who have not learned their lessons from the Pluto and Capricorn cycle beginning in 2008 will have their comeuppance. These include the financial markets, housing markets, banks, corporate lenders, construction businesses, manufacturers who made out like bandits in the bailout of taxpayer dollars. Saturn is about karmic retribution, and since the 2008 debacle was not resolved properly, the upcoming financial disaster will be a death knell for Wall Street, the economic anarchist right-wing libertarians, and assorted enablers. So yes, this information can seem somewhat depressing, another Saturn trait, but this is because current forms have become crystallized and change is now required. Yet Saturn rewards hard work and integration and acceptance of responsibility, and if we individually and collectively start owning our pure spiritual, mental, and heart power, not the fragile ego emotions, we will make many strides towards maturity and leadership in the next 2.5 years. The culmination of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in 2020 will be a turning point away from the worship of money and patriarchal abuses of power, and the beginning of personal embodiment of creative potential. The old guard is dying, but will fight to the end for its survival because it has chosen to disconnect from source. More light and light workers will turn the ship around because the dark, lower consciousness energies of greed, ego, selfishness, cruelty, and abuse will melt in the face of divine truth and compassion for the greater good. But here, we have to be adults and work on healing ourselves of the trauma we've sustained by living multiple lives in patriarchal historical times. Hence, release or transmute the bad father energies into those of good protector and manifestor Saturn, and you will give birth and sustenance to a more satisfying and structurally sound life here on Earth. Time for us to dismiss the emotionally disabled predators who have followed a terribly old script and become the new multivalent sheriffs in town. I'm Meta Astrologer Patrice Kamens.